Hello everyone, welcome to Sales Power in Less Than an Hour. This is for the salesperson who works in upmarket and enterprise. Specifically, whether you're an SDR, a closer, or a leader, we're going to discuss different aspects of large deals from their start to their finish, and some strategies and tactics along the way.
So today we got Josh Gillespie, who a lot of us at PandaDoc actually refer to as the OG, since he was the first salesman with the company back when it was just called QuoteRoller. So now Josh is directing the enterprise sales team, well deserved after years of being a great salesman and leader for the company. So Josh, if you can jump in here and give us a quick story on where you came from and how you got to where you are now.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for the intro. Brandy, Andy. Where did I come from? Yeah. Let's see. I should probably have this elevator down better at this point. Got started, born and raised Portland, Oregon. They call me the OG. 1983 is when I was born, but I guess in San Francisco, 36 years old, and the tech game is getting old these days, huh? And moved to San Francisco in 2006 after I graduated from University of California with a philosophy degree. Honestly, had no idea at that point what I wanted to do in life. The economy was kind of down. Moving to San Francisco, I took a job as a social worker, which was a gratifying job, but you're in your early 20s, caseload of a couple hundred people, salary, more or less structured kind of yearly to go up, maybe 0.5% or something very nominal, right? And even at that time in 2006, it was really expensive for me to live in San Francisco on a social worker salary. So that's kind of how I got into sales initially and into the tech scene, was by necessity. Like I think a lot of folks looking for, that variable pay if you need it. And yeah, I had always thought of myself as a hard worker and a hustler of sorts. So I always maybe in the back of my mind thought I wanted to pursue sales as a career, but in the front of my mind didn't know really how to go about it. Didn't like the idea of sales in general. Was previously kind of an introvert. And then, yeah, through kind of a variety and mismatch of roles starting in about 2008, I felt pretty lucky to kind of fall into the tech scene and had a kind of a variety of sales roles from there, culminating in what's been now a 7-year tenure with Pentadock.
Yeah, man. It's pretty crazy how much has changed since then. You started working with the CEO of the company in an apartment, and now got multiple offices. Not really right now because of COVID, but
offices.
Yeah, offices, virtual offices. Yeah, lots changed since you first started here.
Yeah.
And I would say too, what's changed is probably how you sell PandaDoc, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot we could go into kind of on this front, but in short, right? Like now it's my job. My job's always, I feel like, kind of been the same as, the first sales guy at Pentadock. And by the way, as a salesperson, really awesome to, if you have the opportunity, go on AngelList or go find, an emerging startup or someone that's graduated from an incubator like Y Combinator or what have you, 500 startups. Find a product that resonates with you that you think is cool. And if you can be like the first salesperson at a startup company, you get to do a lot more, obviously, than just sales. And for me, it helped, getting to touch and work with all sides of the company, getting to see the product develop from the ground up to kind of increase my subject matter expertise in the space, to getting to sit into board meetings, and see how fundraising is done. You get to wear a lot of, really cool hats. And obviously, it's our goal to, in the early stages, cover our cost. As you're getting started, don't be an extra cost as a salesperson, right? The goal is to make money for the company at all times, but also always be on a trajectory, kind of like a time trial in Mario Kart or something, to beat yourself, right? Every month, every quarter, every year. And so my job's always been the same, which is to bring in the most revenue and kind of set precedent. As the company grows, as should, the salesperson's, revenue production corollary. And so even though it's been, I think folks ask me, damn, how have you sold Pentadock for 7 years? Well, I love the company values. Its product doesn't suck. but there's an inherent kind of benefit to sticking with it, honestly, for that long, um, in a bunch of ways. And so, um, yeah, obviously, starting off, you want to probably do it like an evangelist sale, right? Like just get some logos to align and use your product and give you a case study. And usually in reciprocity, we'd be happy to kind of give our product away for free, maybe in the earlier days. Nowadays, it's all about average revenue per account, average revenue per user going up. So we have to be very revenue focused in order to drive the value of the business up. And so how do we do that? Well, previously, we used to focus on a lot of short sale transactions, like commercial transactions, like $5,000 contract, 1-year agreement, you know, company with less than 50 employees. I can pretty much guarantee to talk to a decision maker, whether, they're coming to me or I'm coming to them out the bat, have a discussion quickly and get to a sale. Versus now, where in order to grow kind of all the various metrics, we have to move up market. We need to talk to bigger companies that can get more value and provide more use cases. We charge per license. So, the value each user gets is highly variable depending on what they're doing in the system. So bigger company typically means more to do. And then, more employees that could be licensed, right, at scale. And in SaaS, it's all about scalability. And I think that's the one thing that really drew me into software sales, especially, was just knowing there's really no ceiling to it. And when you're in a game where, you're either winning or failing, like you're either growing the business and winning, or the business is stalling out and you're really losing. It's nice, to not have a ceiling, but it's also hard and sometimes not a good idea to take a product that was kind of aimed to service, the SMB space, up market until you have like a variety of things kind of going for you. And so for us, I think, not to go on and on, but it's been a 7-year process to make Pentadoc more or less enterprise grade in all the ways, which is a combination of the product itself being scalable, legal certificates and compliance, things like where the data is stored and being able to suffice a lot of those types of security requirements up market, where you're getting into, a more complex sale, and where any purchase is potentially at scale, creating a lot of risk, if you don't cover those bases.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I really like what you said about joining software and wearing many hats and not having a ceiling, which to people that don't have a lot of work experience, that might sound intimidating. But I think one of the coolest things about it is, most jobs you get, it's like, okay, here's your job. This is what you do. And you don't know what's going to happen next. There's no progression plans. It is what it is. But there's something about working in software that, you can really do anything. Like the product's changing as companies grow, more positions open. And I think that's good, at least speak for myself, people that can feel stuck in a role sometimes. So yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, and it's a long-term game. And I tell my team, if you look at my last 7 years, yes, I've improved my game, over the years, but more or less working, 60 hours probably a week on average that whole time, input equals output and in sales. But like, yeah, as you go, just there's so much benefit to sticking with it. And it all starts with obviously having a good product.
So we kind of touched on this, but I'd like to go a little deeper into what is an enterprise process like? How is it different from SMB, mid-market, and what are the specific challenges that come with it? Because obviously we know the benefits, like there's more users, there's more value. What challenges are you coming across on the day-to-day that you have to get creative to solve?
Sure. And I think people define enterprise and mid-market and SMB kind of differently, but like in short, enterprise, right? Like a scalable solution for a pretty large org. So obviously the sales cycle to get, your product deployed at that level just requires a lot more people, right? It requires a lot of stakeholders, a lot of subject matter experts, a steering committee, typically a big initiative prior to like the sales cycle, where this company or this organization has already decided that we need a solution of similar ilk to solve for, X problem or problems. Assuming that initiative exists, then yeah, it's really more of like a multi-threaded sale where depending on who you're talking to, because you can assume at scale, your product's going to touch every aspect of the business. So SMB, I can sell to a business owner who more or less knows his entire business and is more or less the like sole decision maker. Maybe there's like 1 to 5 people who have influence, but he's cutting the checks. He owns the business. That's my guy. At the enterprise level, decisions are always made by committee, and who owns the budget and how projects are made and budgeted and how timelines and resources are allocated are very complex. You have to be mindful of the entire business in order to get in and fit in. And so we're doing a variety of things, but namely we're using persona-based messaging. So, it definitely requires, the specific value that your product can provide to the various roles at a company, and that you're able to message that value very specifically in their nomenclature and language to that specific person. I can't have the same pitch and the same demo to HR that I'm going to have to marketing, that I'm going to have to sales, that I'm going to have to legal, that I'm going to have to ops. I have to have a very unique conversation with each where I'm really focusing on what each cares about. And then throughout each, really looking to do a deep discovery, peel the onion, uncover values or maybe even problems that they don't know that they yet have by not having our solution, and really an effort to build up champions and figure out who of all these personas, of all these departments, of all these decision makers is a possible salesperson, because I need someone to basically go up to that steering committee at some point without me, with the business case, with the ROI analysis, with the gap analysis, with the mutual action plan, basically the business case to say, we need to purchase PandaDoc by this date to achieve this by this, based on this company initiative. This is what I propose. And that's how that type of sell works. So it's very complex because it's more or less an indirect sell. A lot of times, if you don't identify who even one of those steering committee members is out of 15, they're a potential blocker, because if you don't know who they are, you've never built a relationship and done a persona-based, pitch to them and built them up as a champion. And all it takes, as we know at Pentadoc, like if we were going to buy, like we're only a 400-person company. We're not an enterprise company at all. But I know how we buy software internally, and a lot of mid-market companies are like this, where they have more of an enterprise process to purchase software by committee, and it might take 6 months to a year plus to make a decision. So, all of that sounds kind of like a pain in the ass, I'm sure, but typically well worth it if you are able to sell your product at scale. Now you're talking 6, 7+ figure deals, as opposed to your $5,000 transactions that you have to land and expand, or worse, close and just move on to the next one because there's no growth opportunity there whatsoever.
Cool. So that actually kind of leads to my next question. And, as someone that's been in sales, I don't have the experience you do, but typically salespeople can be looked at as deceiving or dishonest.
What?
Yeah, right. Shocker. In a lot of industries that is the case. It's unfortunate. I think one of the reasons why a lot of us look up to you is because you're very straightforward and honest. And that's important when you're in sales. So what do you do to, not that you go into a call assuming that they're going to think you might be deceiving them in one way, but what are some tactics you use while you're staying honest and transparent, yet trying to sell something to someone?
First off, don't deceive, don't lie. Like when you do it, you're doing it. So it is in my book, a conscious act that's a fireable offense. So there's that. Number 2, though, outside of that, because, sometimes we get excited or we just provide misinformation, or there might be an honest miscommunication, this and that. In general, though, the first rule is always, we are in the business of disqualifying opportunities. That's always my first goal on the call, is to see, especially up market, to get an opportunity to go from S0 or S1, stage 1 to closed 1, S5. It could take 9 months of work. it could take 40 plus hours of my individual time to do all those things I said, engage all the various stakeholders, have one-on-one phone calls, pitch them PandaDoc, give them access to POC sandboxes. It's going to take a lot of time for me to get from first base to home. So knowing that, and knowing that I only have so much time in a week, only have so much time in a year, only have so much time to dedicate all of that activity to fully qualified, opportunities, that for sure I'm aggressively disqualifying opportunities. And this is really good for two things. Number one, it helps me not waste time on stuff that's hopeful, where I'm talking to some maybe low level, no offense, but like project manager or technical evaluator that's basically information gathering, right? And basically passing that information up to some other person who would then make some decision, but is indirect to me. So like, these are scenarios that happen all the time, especially like, when big companies put an initiative in place, they'll create like an RFP, an RFI, send that out to all the big players, and they'll ask you to spend like 15 hours, filling it out. So part of my rigorous disqualification, and this doesn't work for all business models, but I do not respond to RFPs. So number one, we are in the business of disqualifying opportunities. Number two, if you receive an RFP, by virtue of that, you're agreeing to take a potential buyer through their journey as opposed to yours. I have no idea how a buyer's self-imposed journey is going to convert. I cannot forecast that. I cannot account that versus what I know, which is forcing buyers to go through my buyer's journey, which is for sure the best journey for them to go through. So a lot of times, yeah, we get big RFPs that, maybe they sound like they're in scope, but a lot of times you spend all these resources filling them out from your InfoSec team, your legal, hours and hours of work, you submit it, and then you never hear from them again, or really you're just engaging in a bidding war that's going to help, the predominant player, or help the customer secure the predominant player at a lower rate, thanks to you and all your work. So disqualify. I think especially in the SaaS game in San Francisco, it seems like a lot of companies like ours too, we get really hungry off this inbound model and we just want to work and close anything that's in front of us. No, got to save our time up market. It's paramount that we don't waste time. Now, number two, what's really cool is if you think about the whole parent-child relationship thing, a lot of, salespeople are kind of perpetually in this child seat where the buyer kind of has all the power. Well, what happens when in the first 5 minutes you start trying to disqualify your buyer, even though they might actually be qualified? Psychologically, it's a Jedi mind trick every time where, hey, actually, I'm interested in this. Why are you trying to get rid of me? Like, let's talk. No. And they a lot of times start pitching themselves as to why they're a good fit for your product. That's exactly what we want to have happen. And so, yeah, and then, lastly, as far as a trust building exercise, what builds trust better than the fact of I'm a salesperson telling you you're not qualified to buy my stuff. I got to go take another call. It's the best trust building exercise there is, because otherwise they fully expect me to pitch, my product to the death, and try to give them every angle. But no, I'm only looking to spend time with those who are 100% a fit for the product that we built. And last point is up market. Another reason why we should tear up every RFP we receive is, why do we have a reactive selling process at all? If we built a product that's enterprise grade, well, guess what? There's a list of all the companies in the world that are enterprise grade that could be potential buyers for my product. Therefore, why am I waiting for them to come to me? Or why I'm not going out to them with my specific pitch and my approved and recommending them that they go down my best practice buying process. So yeah, disqualify, and never respond to RFPs unless for some reason that's like already baked into your business model.
Yeah, I really like that approach, man, because I'll go places now where they just try to sell you something. They don't ask questions. There's no rapport. And it couldn't be any more obvious that it's like, I want to sell you something. I don't care if you need it or not. So I would much rather you sit here and tell me you probably don't need the product. Like, let's part ways, for me to actually think like, okay, do I need it? Because then you're mutually figuring out, do I need it? Instead of you spamming me with emails, not knowing who I am, telling me why I need it. So I like that when it comes to trust building rapport is like, are you really
Yeah.
trying to help me? And which this, yeah.
And it's crazy, like little things you can do in like 5 minutes that build a lot of trust that competitively I think a lot of reps don't do, which is still insane to me. Like just a little bit of research goes a long way. Like you can go on LinkedIn free, you don't even need Navigator, and see like where someone's located, right? Like that tells you a lot just regionally, you know, where they're based about a person. Especially if you're a sports guy like you, Andy, right? Like there's some interesting weather patterns out there these days. There's like, and then obviously if you have a book of business, you also want to know as reference, maybe I'm actually already have a customer who's this guy's next door neighbor, or maybe my colleague that's another rep is already working with someone that they know about. Like do your research, right? Like, cause that's building trust. Versus just asking questions without doing research, and then show them that you've done that research, and actually you will stand out, because I feel like competitively I blow people away all the time just by saying things that are public information that I found out literally 3 minutes before the call.
Yeah, for sure. I think it just shows you care. Like you give a damn on like who they are. At the end of the day, I know, you specifically are the type of person that actually likes to talk to people. Like you're curious to know, like you find out from like Boston, you want to ask them about the weather and like the sports and stuff. So
you have to genuinely care about the people, and about what you're selling, and about the problems that they have. If you can't get yourself to genuinely care, then you're not fit for the job. And there could be a variety of reasons. Like maybe you're still good at sales, but just working for the wrong company, and you need to go find something that you're more interested in. But in general, I think it's a really bad indicator in a lot of ways.
Definitely.
And then lastly, like trust on that issue, I could go on and on, but for anyone who's done a job for longer than 2 years, I also know that the average tenure of a SaaS sales rep in San Francisco is about 18 months. I'm just making that up, but I'm guessing. And that's because usually, when you're working 60, 80 hours selling in San Francisco, after a couple of years, you're either going to do something else, go down, or go up, maybe get promoted. Now what happens is, take a startup like us, where we've treated our people really good. We have a good culture, even though we're 400 employees and still considered a startup and the small guys compared to a couple of public companies that we compete against. Many of our employees have been here for 3, 4, 5, 7 years, like myself. So competitively, the storytelling becomes really important as a startup. People love hearing about new things that are being built. They want to be on the cusp of new tech, upmarket. Your CIOs, they want to be able to point back 3 years and say, hey, I was one of the first people that saw PandaDoc and invested in it, and looking at it now, But if you imagine like the storytelling behind the startup is a good one, right? Especially when you're going up against some legacy player that's been the same app for 20 years. But on top of that, when they talk to us, they're much more likely to get a mature experience if someone's been there for 4 years versus I'm talking to a public company that's kind of churning out sales reps every year or two. So I tell my sales reps that all the time, which is let's focus on providing a better pre-sales experience than the customer's getting from their incumbent solution as a current customer, because that's giving them all the trust they need. Like if our sales team is super responsive, if we're not so salesy and more focused on providing a solution, willing to set up technical calls as a means of technical validation with a solutions engineer, willing to dive into integrations, and we've been representing our product for 2 to 5 years, we're more likely to be the product specialist, the technical expert, the subject matter expert, and more believable in that role versus, some public company sales rep who's obviously more or less quota-minded. And so for us, storytelling is a huge differentiator. So by the time they even see the product, they don't really care so much about the gap analysis and the apples to oranges, because they want to invest in who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like too, once you build that level of trust with the added business industry expertise, you can really become their guide. Like then the disqualification becomes less technical for, do I need to spend my time on this or not? It's also like, is this really the best choice for you? I don't think so, and here's why. But I'm speaking from like, I have an expertise in this industry, you're an expert for your company, so let's keep talking about it and come to a conclusion, you know? And then that's a much better deal process for both people.
Yeah, and it has to be that way because it's not, you don't have the benefit of the SMB sell where it's like build up, you know, to this crescendo of a buying moment, boom, close, all right, done, pass you off, on to the next one. Up market especially, the first contract is usually some proof of concept or kind of, like land and expand, you know, first contract where, hey, we've identified this pilot group. It looks like you're a possible solution. We want to invest some nominal amount to see how this goes. If that goes well, we'll build a business case maybe for the next group or for some holistic, you know, rollout. And so, yeah, usually it's your second, third, fourth, even maybe contract up market. That's actually the big one. So, you know, you have to crescendo past that first transaction. There's no drop off. So knowing you have to keep managing the relationship and keep selling, you know, after the transaction is a little bit different where I think, you know, your average commercial rep maybe likes starting anew. As opposed to getting kind of in the weeds further and further, right, as we go.
Yeah. So Josh, I wanted to ask you about, because I'm sure having to discover all of that for yourself had its ups and downs. Is there one failure that you learned a lot from, you know, somewhere along the line in your career that still...
Every day, every damn day. Yeah. I mean, we're in sales. We fail all the time. So yeah, I think it's been a super evolutionary role for me in a lot of ways, just by virtue of continuing to do the job and pressing through. And so I know all the reasons for which we fail as potentially in a sales cycle, and I'm still learning ways that I could fail, right? Like you can fail in many more ways than you can potentially win. Your question kind of framed as though like I had figured everything out on myself. I think to some extent, I definitely learned as I've gone and just kind of fell forward in this role over the last 7 years, but I also had some really good mentors and advisors behind the scene who we're more like enterprise, like those two things, for example, like disqualify and rip up RFPs. Those come from actually like a famous personality named Raj, who was the CRO at Tibco for a few years. And I was lucky enough to sit in the back room at my last startup and kind of get some software training that at the time was not pertinent at all to the advertising product I was selling. But today in the Pentadock world, I remember a lot of these lessons, even though it was like probably almost 8 years ago. He went on, I think, to be the CRO of Aptus. But yeah, so like you got to find mentors in the game. Like if you're in San Francisco, like there's no shortage of subject matter experts and blogs and books and people you can even go meet and have coffee with. And I always encourage folks to do that. For me specifically, there was a case early on where it was going to be our biggest deal by far. This is probably like 2 to 3 years into Pentadock, maybe around 2015, 2016. And it was a 6-figure opportunity where we were multi-threaded, up market, large company in Canada, which should have been my first clue. And I'll tell you why in a second. But obviously, 2 things are super important to get to the finish line at a larger org or like an up market deal. Number one, legal review, right? Like for sure, they're going to look at your MSA and your SLA and your NDA and anything else you send them, your DPA, whatever it is. And they're going to forward it to their counsel. And big bank always takes little bank. So you can expect that they're going to have some requests there and you're going to have to go back and forth with legal. And that process alone, even after they've verbally potentially committed to a deal with you, could be 3 months. I've seen worse, where lawyers are just going back and forth. And obviously sometimes lawyers have no commercial urgency, or if the deal's of a certain size, it might keep falling to the bottom, right, of their stack if they're working on multi-million-dollar acquisitions or what have you. So legal procurement can be frustrating. Up market, you have to account for that in your forecasting. Even when you're in S4 negotiation, getting verbals from your steering committee, if you haven't gone through legal yet, you shouldn't even forecast in that current quarter, is my perspective. And so I learned that lesson because two things happened. The second thing is IT. You might be selling to a marketing and a sales ops, even a C-suite stakeholder. They might be completely amped, giving you verbals, telling you they're ready to move forward. Well, what happens once they purchase? Who's managing the software application? Who's provisioning the users? Who's getting it integrated to their ERP or their CRM? Who's doing the actual work and the elbow grease? It's usually not the software provider. I mean, we have onboarding services that we provide, but we need someone on their side to be the administrator, to own it. And that's always someone in IT, whether it's a IT manager or a IT VP or a director, or sometimes there's sales ops and global sales ops. But ultimately, IT cares about potential risks that we're creating by deploying this software at scale. And so for us, it was a bigger company. They were dealing with medical records, should have been my second hint. In Canada, they care a lot about security. I mean, they do kind of everywhere now, but Canada, I notice the IT folks get involved a lot pre-sale, kind of early on. So long story shorter, I promise. Basically, this deal cycle, we got to S4. I had forecasted it. I had C-suite alignment. I was getting verbals. It was a big deal. Everyone was getting excited. I didn't go get the Porsche yet, but I was thinking about it. No, the Tesla, of course. And basically at the very, very end of my sales cycle, which was at least 3-4 months long, I had one very frank call with their IT director who said, hey, by the way, we require ISO compliance. At the time, we just had SOC 2. And he required that the data be stored in a data center in Canada. And our data was AWS in the United States only. So it sucks when you get to the end of a really long sales cycle and get blocked by a couple of things that we probably could have or should have, right, identified early on to save everyone that amount of time. And that also goes back to my point about we're in the in the process of, or we're in the business of disqualifying opportunities. That's so important because otherwise this will happen to you all the time where in good faith, you might get pretty far to third base with a lot of the various stakeholders. But if you get to the wrong stakeholder at the end and he blocks you at his first base, it really, really sucks. So you do have to engage IT, ops, legal, all the folks who maybe aren't so fun to pitch and sell to, or maybe aren't so generally receptive to. You have to aggressively multi-thread early to make sure you're not going to get blocked at the end like that.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think, every mistake's a learning lesson. So I'm sure it sucked to lose that deal with the Canadian company. But early in the call, when Brandy asked you to compare upmarket to SMB and mid-market, you mentioned that it takes a lot more time to go through. So I'm sure there's a lot different compliance things that you have to go through with these upmarkets. So if anything, that was a lesson that you learned from. So, don't count your chickens before they hatch, and, a deal's not done till it's done. The smallest things can pop up, unfortunately, but it happens. Yeah. That now.
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's an IT stakeholder or global ops stakeholder on the line, I pretty much start the call with, hey, a few housekeeping items for the IT folks on the line to get out the way. If we're good there, feel free to drop. I know typically you have a few specific questions. Pentadoc SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. We're HIPAA compliant. We're GDPR compliant. We do share our SOC 2 report with a signed NDA. We use Amazon Web Services. Our data center is based in the US, as is the backup. Any questions on what I just said? And they're always just like, whoa, sales guy came out the gate just telling us exactly what we need to know. If they have questions, cool, they can ask a few questions, and we front load that before we start getting into the real sales from there.
Yeah, definitely, man. So feeding off of that, you might have some a lot of answers to this one too, I'm sure. You've had a pretty good career at PandaDoc. What are some successes you had, or is there any big success that you feel like stands out to you the most?
The fact that I'm still standing 7 years later, still, I think, at the top of my game. I mean, It's at the end of September, and I've already put in a personal sales record for this year. So um, I think obviously COVID being an e-signature, it's been a weird year overall for business, but in general, it's helped us. And I think also helped me keep perspective that even year after year, and this is the point I think I forgot earlier when I trailed off, but by sticking with it, as the company grows in the SaaS space, like if your trajectory is to do 5 million in ARR, and then you grow to do 10 million, 20 million, 25 million, for those that are sitting in the seats that are doing the sales, and assuming the company is achieving those milestones at a good clip, guaranteed the production per rep is also going up. Like it has to. It's pretty corollary, like a rep's quota attainment possibility with the success that the company is having. So for me, Pandadoc's been just this linear machine. It's gone up from 0 to $30 million in ARR now, and as has my sales, along the way, this linear line where the first year I was averaging 20K a month, to the point where I am now averaging 110 a month. But from there, it's more now I get to be pretty philosophical, and I think share a lot of learnings. And so that's the fun part for me, is not just where I can take it personally now that we're past, that $1 million pace per year, which I think is really important for any SaaS product, to get many reps to be able to repeat that. That's a great indicator of the company's success as well. And so not just having me as an IC be able to hit those types of numbers, but now working with our other top ICs and AEs to be able to do the same. And so now I have a team of 3 folks, and that's super exciting for me, just seeing other people kind of get their career started here and seeing them grow it too in that same linear fashion, as the company probably expects to get to plus 50 million in ARR at some point, mid to end next year.
All right, I got one last question for you. What is one thing that someone can do today, right now, to get better at sales?
Oh, look in the mirror. No, seriously, like it's okay. It's not for everyone. And there might be a variety of reasons for that. Maybe, like we say in sales, timing is everything. For me, I had to get to kind of a candidly desperate time period in life before it was necessary that I be good at sales. I think if I had took on a similar role before, where I was maybe just single and responsible for myself and I didn't have a family and a mortgage, I wouldn't have had to have been good, and therefore I wouldn't have been good. So for me in this role, it's hard. Necessity breeds success though. And I'm not saying you should just like go get married in your mid-20s and take on a mortgage that you can't afford like I do. But I kind of think that was the impetus and the kick in the pants that caused me to be like, damn, I have to get my variable pay up if I want to stay in San Francisco, if I want to put food on the table. I need to be like a high six-figure income earner. And if I want to take vacations and do more from there, you kind of can do the math backwards. And that's what's fun about sales, but it's also very daunting. So, know what you're signing up for. I think a lot of salespeople, are kind of successful because of the conditions that their company provides. So if you're already a successful rep like I am, still look at yourself in the mirror. Is that because the company feeds me a bunch of inbound opportunities or has a bunch of, A-player resources, and I'm more or less a secretary that's coordinating the calls, and then, I can kind of sit back and get a deal closed? Because that does happen a lot of time up market, where you have so many resources as a salesperson, you're more or less a coordinator of sorts. And so look at yourself in the mirror, whether you're an existing successful salesperson that's looking to do more or feel like you're worth more, or if you're looking to get in the game. And if that's the case, I always recommend jumping in. And for me, I hated my first sales job. No offense, Yelp. In hindsight, it was the best job I've ever had in my life, because even though I didn't like it at the time, making 150 dials, calling a bunch of small businesses that had a mixed mash of reviews that they had never seen before and were surprised to read for the most part when I called, was good experience, right? Like rejection. I think my first 8 months, my first sales job at Yelp, 1 out of 750 phone calls, about 1 call a week. For me, it was a closed deal, was a signed contract. So if you're making $150 a day times 5 days a week, that's $750 a week, where 1 is converting. Man, like that's pretty defeatist. That's pretty tough. But it was special to also be a part of like this startup atmosphere that was, a rocket ship back in 2008 when I was there. They were growing by 1 million uniques. And by cutting my teeth in that role and kind of learning the game and just pushing through and, I started using Salesforce. Like it taught me a lot in hindsight that I'm very thankful for, and also got me on, got a good rocket ship startup on my resume that for sure helped, land my next job and my next job and my next job after that. So, it's okay if your first sales job isn't an enjoyable one. It's not really supposed to be. If you want to get to a place where you're making a lot of money because you're good at sales, then you really need that type of experience out the gate.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think that's good advice. And we've talked about it with previous guests that cold calling is kind of a segue into things. And, some people actually enjoy that. It's what they want to do for a long time. But, you think about it, when you got into sales, it's kind of a fruitless venture at first, making all those dials. And realistically, it hasn't been that long since you've been at Yelp, and look at where you are now.
Exactly. I mean, it's been a long 8 years, but it's only 8 years, right? And like, you can in sales build yourself like right time, right place, right products. You can have an amazing career, get in, get out in 10 years. That ain't so bad. But it is about, like, I see a lot of good salespeople, I feel like, working in kind of strange atmospheres or at companies that are already really huge or with products that break. And it's like, know what you signed up for. Again, do your research. If you're a good salesperson, there's plenty of amazing companies that have good products, good teams. And that's really what we're selling. It's not so much your salesmanship at the end of the day. It's who and what you represent. It really is. And you do have the power to kind of pick and choose where you at least apply, right, to where you want to work.
Definitely, man. Well, thank you for coming on. We're very happy to have you as a mentor, and company's lucky to have you too. So
we're already done, man. Come on, let's do another 3 hours, right? We're good. I thought it was an all-day thing. No?
It's like Joe Rogan.
All right, we'll go talk to some customers. But I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Josh.
man.